let's pick up where we left off. If we could all please take our seats or exit quietly. I'm not trained for crowd control. Thank you. Let's pick up where Bill left off and move very far away from the Alliance's eastern flank. We know that Australia is one of the Alliance's most important global partners. Excuse me, folks, could you all please move out of the hall if you're going to have conversations? We'd appreciate that very much. Thank you. We know that Australia is one of the Alliance's most important global partners. We know that it's been side by side with the Alliance on some of its most important counter-terrorism operations in recent years, and so may have advice and insight into the question of how NATO engages with counter-terrorism looking ahead. But we also know it's at the leading edge of engaging with China's rise in all of its dimensions: security, defense, economics, and so on. So we're very, very pleased to have an Australian perspective here next. Please join us in welcoming former Australian Minister for Foreign Affairs and Executive Chair of the International School for Government at King's College, Alexander Downer.
Well, thanks very much for having me at this conference, and you might think having an Australian here is a bit out of context. And what I want to do is try it in the 5 minutes I have available to me to try to put my country in a context which makes it highly relevant to NATO in the future. So we don't live in 1949. The world has completely changed. And when I was the Foreign Minister of Australia, which was between 1996 and 2007, one of the thoughts I had was we need to engage with NATO, and I was the first Australian minister ever to address the North Atlantic Council. Now, why did I do that? The most important single geopolitical issue in the world today isn't anything to do with Europe. It's the rise of China. Now, we don't want to confront China. We don't want to pursue a policy of containment of China. We want to engage with China. But a country like mine, an ally of the United States, and countries like Japan and Korea in the Indo-Pacific region, also allies of the United States, we uphold liberal democratic values. We support democracy in its broad sense, international norms of human rights, and very importantly, the rule of international law. And it's those values, and if you like, those policies, in particular the support for the rule of international law, which we have entirely in common with NATO. And we also have in common with NATO an almost identical alliance relationship with the United States of America, which of course dominates NATO. So in this more globalized world, where you might question what threats you face in Europe and whether the transatlantic relationship matters so much anymore, our submission to you is that you should think globally. We shouldn't just think regionally. And we should be thinking about how the liberal democracies of the world, those countries that share those liberal democratic values, those countries that want to uphold the rule of international law, those countries that believe in international norms of human rights, those countries that think those things are going to contribute to a stable and happier world, how we as countries work together better than we have done so far. I don't want to portray an image of us believing that the rise of China, a sort of recalcitrant Russia, certainly not a rise of Russia, a declining power, but nevertheless a difficult power, or a country like Iran, are countries that the whole time we need to confront. They are countries that need to understand that there is a great body of nations in this world which uphold those broader liberal democratic values and which cooperate with each other and coordinate policies with each other. So, very quickly, NATO embraced countries like Australia from outside of NATO, but allies of the United States in Afghanistan, where we work together very easily. Common doctrines, of course. I mentioned earlier, common alliance with the United States, in our case, a very strong and historic relationship with the United Kingdom as well. We were able to work hand in glove with NATO in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is not, of course, in the North Atlantic region, so it was where NATO started, if you like, to spread its wings. So what we would like to see is an outward-looking NATO, a NATO that not only embraces partners like Australia, Japan, Korea in the Indo-Pacific region, but that NATO starts to think of itself more as the centerpiece of, if you like, very broadly defined Western security architecture. So I can imagine in the years ahead at the NATO summit, you wouldn't just have the Australian Foreign Minister turn up, you would have the Australian Prime Minister, you would have the Japanese Prime Minister, you would have the Korean President, you would have these people participate in the summit. Because nowhere in this world today do Western countries get together in that way to coordinate security policy. And NATO can be the catalyst to build a stronger, more global alliance of Western liberal democratic powers. And I can see up there it says my time is up, so I hope I've delivered my message to you. Thank you very much.
Ladies